Hi, Liv. It's great to see you. I'm very happy that you agreed to do this talk. And I'm very much interested in your work and how you do it. And maybe you could share something about the evolution of your approach, how has been evolving over time.
Yeah, I've been a trainer for in nonviolent communication since like 20 years or something. And before that, I also did mediation. I worked with group management and so on. And I actually didn't really know what I was doing in the sense of that I saw that sometimes what I did worked and sometimes I did not. And then learning nonviolent communication, it was like, aha, that's what I do when it works. And this is what I do when it's not working. So for me, it's gone from kind of trying to find ways to fix a conflict, to kind of fix people so that they come into connection and work with solutions, into more of a sense of, well, I find conflict really interesting. The sense of I'm not doing mediation to get rid of conflict. Now, I don't see conflict and peace as opposites. I see conflict as part of humans coming together and being able and willing to speak up and to actually have different views on things and learn from each other.
Mm.
It has grown a lot from kind of being a peacemaker already as a child, and then actually knowing more what is it that I do at the moment.
So in this sense of like welcoming conflict and seeing that it's not the opposite to peace, I wonder like how do you do that? I'm always also interested in like the somatics. How do you work with your body? I know that you have been exploring passionately the topic of shame. So I'm also curious about how that comes into play in your work.
Yeah, I when I do mediation programs, I always tell people, well, first thing a mediator needs to do is to find a way to have. I borrowed the term from Lisa Feldman Barrett, to have an energy budget that is balanced. And for me, that's kind of, do I eat well enough? Do I sleep enough? Do I use my body as a, in movement in something that I enjoy? Like I'm a passionate cross-country skier. I live up north where there's lots of snow. So this is ski season for me. And it's like one of the places to go back to the body, because if the body is not taken care of and you need a clear mind and you need a clear attention to people, if your body is sore and tired, you're gonna be of less use. So I don't know if I use the body so much when it comes to the mediation itself, but I every day it's part of my practice to notice, what is this body that I'm given, those cells that actually kind of that I can lead somewhere. There are many cells around, but these are particular ones that I can actually ask to move and they will move with me. So, and when it comes to shame, well, the physical, the awkward feelings of shame is very much there in the body. And it's very much there as soon as there's conflict, there's usually a layer of shame there that we also need to kind of work with.
Okay, so on the one hand, I hear like taking good care of your needs, of the needs of your body, kind of having enough resources to enable your work. That's part of the mediator self-care. And then you mentioned that, okay, when you start doing mediation, that shame is somehow present, and then there is a layer of shame there. Could you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, and this is a dilemma, I think, for most mediation practices, is that people do feel shame about conflicts. So we don't want to, because conflict is like bad. Conflict is not a good thing. So that's what people get. Like, so then showing that I have a conflict, if that the society around me, my family or my friends or whatever, if they see conflict as bad, there's going to be a shame just around that in itself. But then there's another layer of shame usually in conflicts, at least when there's conflict that has come as far as asking for a third party, like asking for a mediator to come in. Usually then there's some awareness of that maybe both of us, maybe one of us has done something that has hurt the other. And the shame that is there as a good power, as a good source for humans to kind of realize that, oh, I'm not very happy about this thing that I did. I feel kind of ashamed that I cheated on you. I didn't come in time with my information for our common project. I stole money from you, or whatever I have done that is part of the conflict. And there's usually shame there. And when there's shame, it's like, I see like two ways. One is that sometimes the shame will block us. Like we don't know what to say when we feel shame. We don't know what to do. We have well, I call it shame stupid. We become like totally blocked in our way of communicating because it's so awkward. It feels awkward for many of us. But then there's that possibility with shame of actually, with the right support, to have shame transform into compassion, into noticing that, whoa, there's someone else here that has needs, and I was not considering those needs. I was not, in that moment when I acted the way I did, I wasn't considering your needs or how it was for you to be in this situation.
Yeah.
As you hear, I can say much more when it comes to shame. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
one of my areas of interest, but I think I'll stop there for now.
Yeah. And I can imagine how your own exploration is adding depth into the process. Like you are able to see more from that human base. And how do you, so then when there is shame present, do you have a like specific way of approaching it from your position of a mediator?
Yeah, a few ways. One is to know that shame is contagious. Sense of when someone feels shame, there's usually shame in others. We hold the shame space usually together. So if one of the parties, if I'm the mediator, and one of the parties feels shame, it's very likely that I will feel shame until they kind of fully own it, because it's like embarrassing to hear how people treat each other or treat themselves, and so knowing as a mediator a way to transform it into needs would be, one way. And I use what I call and have written about is the compass of needs, which is just to recognize that we try to avoid shame. And then when we can recognize we avoid it, we can usually reconnect to needs again. Simplified. It might take some practice.
Yeah. I'm just kind of taking it in. Just I imagine like you kind of temporarily hosting shame for the parties before they can access it themselves. I see it as a very interesting concept, like the mediator kind of like a hosting body for for feelings in the process.
Yeah.
Have you had some really interesting moments of transformation that you would like to share, or something that could be maybe of inspiration to others?
I think I've had many, and of course I've had many also with participants in mediations I've done, which is always like vulnerable. I what goes on in the mediation stays in the mediation, so to speak. But no, I've noticed again and again, actually, myself having shame, and how in my head, the idea of this is so wrong. If I tell this to anyone, this is kind of going to be such a disaster. The shame usually makes us enlarge our importance and enlarge our mistakes. And the moment when I'm able to help someone else to realize that maybe it's not deadly, maybe it's just human to do mistakes sometimes, maybe it's just human to kind of not be perfect. Maybe. And if I can live that, it's almost inevitable that the shame will then become vulnerability and fear, of course, to not be accepted. But the moment when we kind of face it, it's like going out and in the sun, you know, we get some lights on it instead of hiding it inside. It usually kind of pops. It's not going to be so big anymore. So I always enjoy in me and in others when I can follow that, like this is such a big mistake, into okay, let's deal with this very human thing. So it's like a mundane miracle, an everyday miracle. I find it quite amazing, actually.
Wonderful. So as I hear it, that actually the practice of welcoming shame is actually connected to working with the fear of shame. And if I think of shame is a very kind of a powerful feeling in terms of physiology. Is there anything that has helped you over time? Maybe it was just a practice, but what can help us over time to be able to contain this kind of emotion? Because it's a kind of, it shuts us down, and it can be, yeah, for some of us, I can imagine it can be overwhelming. I mean, I had my own intense shame moments, and it's quite something to deal with if I am allowing myself to feel it in my body.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few things. One is, of course, to like, I do trainings on shame, and I invite people to look at shame from different angles. So this is one way to kind of set up, and it could be anything from doing a training, it could be doing a journal, like having a body that I can share shameful moments with, like just being willing to take a look at that, the shame. And it's not so easy, because we need to really commit to it. It's like when we were children, it was a good thing that we avoided to actually acknowledge it, because it made us more safe. So we gave in, we kind of gave up and let our parents support us instead. So it's habitual that we avoid it. So it also needs to be a choice to kind of, okay, I'm going to try to look at this shame. And when we do that, when we kind of willingly look at it and say, I want to know what's going on, we start disentangle fear, I would say, from the shame. And that's one step. Like, to when the fear is not so strong, then it's much easier. And the fear, of course, comes from, I would say, generations of when shame meant death, when shame meant I was outcast, when shame meant I had done something that didn't made me, included. So that fear is that we think we're gonna die, even if it's just that I actually broke your back or something. It feels like, oh, it's gonna be so hard to say this. And when we kind of disentangle that fear from the shame itself, there is something that happens too it's like less daunting and less stressful to our nervous system. So for me, that is one of the ways. And another way, I use the three needs of that we call BAD: belonging, acceptance, and dignity. And usually I'm not saying that it's always these needs when it comes to shame, but when I can remember, as a human, I have a need for belonging, I have a need for acceptance, and I have a need for dignity, something's kind of shifting. And then I might say, well, I also have a need for connection, and I have a need for safety, and so on. There's usually some key elements of reminding myself of being human, that then shame becomes more bearable.
Yeah. As I listen to you, and as I take in also the kind of the ancestral part of that, I could sense a lot of flow in my body. So it's I just can perceive the power of the topic of shame. And yeah, when I imagine you, like, part of your passion is this exploring of shame, of something that we usually like to suppress. What is it that is kind of driving you in your work as a trainer, as a mediator?
Well, one is that I really, really enjoy the moment of transformation. I really, really enjoy being able to kind of support and hold someone that is struggling with something, and with some cues, with some of the things I've learned that works for me and for others that I've worked with, to support that. And then that going into from withdrawal to vulnerability and then to compassion. It's like, it's the luxury of life, I would say. It's like the cream on the cake. Is like such a beautiful thing to be able to support people, and in that, and in myself too. Well, like seeing that that it's possible. It's not just happening by random transformation, and no, it's happening through us skillfully looking at life and trying to surf the energy of it. And to me, the last years I've been studying a lot about development, like how does humans develop, and not only childhood development but also adult development. And it's quite amazing the different research that has been made on what really is that. And I think that's another driver for me, the curiosity of learning more, like what other people put time to, and then learning that. It's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, lovely. So the drive of kind of learning, exploring, and also the witnessing of transformation. I guess I'm imagining from my own experience, like the more you do it, you gain kind of trust in the process. And then as a mediator or as a participant of a process, you bring in that trust also as a resource. And I'm curious if you also experience it so that sometimes, at least that's how it is for me, that sometimes by entering the process and entering the role, I can get nourished by it, just nourished by the role that I enter into, and the role of service, basically. I wonder how you experience that.
Yeah, it's like in the mediation, in the mediator's role, it's like I want to remind myself that I'm kind of given power to influence people or to hold their process. So I'm given that power for at least 1 hour, 2 hours a day, or whatever the mediation might be. And that power I want to use wisely. I want to be able to direct that to places where I have learned that this is fruitful to go. And then, slowly letting that power go back to where it kind of belongs, or the people that gave me the power to be the mediator in first place. It's like the traffic police metaphor. Like I'm given the power to be the traffic police during a certain amount of time, and I want to kind of use that, and then have that power being used for the good for these people and for me. The sense of, whoa, we're moving somewhere where we long to be, where we want to be in this connection.
Speaking of this role and having that power as the third side, and then offering the service, like what play does spirituality play for you in this process?
Yeah, I don't know what you mean with that, but we'll see if I answer your question. And the spirituality can mean so much. But for me, it's like knowing for myself when I'm in a conflict and someone mediates, it's like getting a chance to have a third perspective, like an enlarged place. Like when I'm in a conflict, I'm like usually like me, and then I see there's someone else. It's like, okay, there's you as well, but then there's a third party, and then so it enlarges, and then maybe even the fourth person perspective of us realizing we're doing this now, but we're gonna actually move out of this mediation soon, and time will also influence what we do with this mediation. It's like, to me, that spirituality, like an expanded living space for a moment to kind of look at life from more perspectives than I'm able to do when I'm just me. When I get the chance also as a mediator to kind of zoom out and then zoom in and then zoom out, and to kind of use the awareness of time and use the awareness of space and use the awareness of that we need support. Humans need support, and expansion is one part. And for me, that is a very spiritual experience many times. Just that I'm able to let go of myself and be something bigger. And I'm not saying I can do that in everyday life, like with my own relationships and so on. But in that moment, it's like opening up for that spaciousness.
So opening up to something larger. And I like what you mentioned about the idea of zooming in and zooming out to hold something kind of bigger. I like that metaphor. And do you have like a personal practice that supports you in this? Do you have?
Yeah, a few. So one is what I said before, to make sure I take care of my body, because the body, if I take care of my body, it doesn't disturb my presence because it kind of relaxes into it. No, it will be taken care of. So that is a good thing. So it will be there supporting me. Another thing that I very often do, I do breathing exercises based on heart math techniques, if you heard about heart math. So it's very simple, heart-centered meditation with breath. And I can even do that with my eyes open when I go to, if I drive to a mediation place, for example, I can just spend like 20 minutes in the car breathing, keeping focus. And I live up in north of Sweden, so it's not traffic like in a big town, but it's usually going into the car and driving through the forest to some place. And that really helps me to kind of keep centered. I don't even know if it's heart-centered. I don't know, but I just know it's different to put my focus down in my body more than anything. And that it's also part of the expansion, like being with breath, just the simplicity of breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, having that. I don't have resistance to breathing out. I don't have resistance to breathing in, but it's more like the process of that, allowing that. That's one of my practices.
Wonderful. And I imagine how, you being resourced, you taking care of yourself and practicing this. It's like you bring a resource with yourself, with your presence, into a situation when there is usually some kind of constriction or lack. So it makes total sense to me.
And I'm also a very good sleeper. That is one thing I do. Almost every day I sleep 20 minutes at the middle of the day, if I can. Even when I do trainings, I was in Ukraine a few weeks back, and I even slept on a sofa, just like on a sofa, to clear my nervous system from stress. And it really, really helps. And if I don't fall asleep in those 20 minutes, I just lay there and, meditate or stay aware. And sleep is mystery for me. It's like a really good resource.
Yeah. I like to do that too. Yeah. And speaking of peace, the name of the series is Peace Talks, and peace is something that I really like to explore. I imagine that you had a kind of some learnings as far as the use of force, the protective use of force is concerned. And I'd be very curious to hear about that, because we're also a community of nonviolent communication trainers. So it's like finding alternatives to violence. And there are some situations where the situation calls for some protection. So I would like to know how you see this.
Yeah, it's like easy to think of nonviolent communication as empathic listening and expression with honesty, and maybe with self-empathy. Maybe we talk about NVC as this is the thing. And then Marshall, he wrote his book, The Language for Life. He actually have a whole chapter on protective use of force. And it seems like it's one of those things that kind of it's forgotten many times in trainings. I don't know if I'm right, but I find that it doesn't have such high status. And I've come to realize, also from the work I did in Ukraine, but in other places as well, that if we're not able to do protective use of force, we are likely to listen, for example, even if we don't want to, because we think we should. We should always be communicative. We should always be willing to engage in connection. We should always be, willing to do that. And then, the should in there, the should in I should listen to you with empathy. It kind of makes the empathy murky. The empathy is kind of there out of duty, not out of the pure joy of me wanting to be there with you. But if I'm clear about the foundation of protective use of force, then I will also be clear on my yes and no when it's not so, acutely big as protective use of force might be, like throwing someone out of your house that is threatening you. But it's also a way of protecting life energy, and being more clear on that. And there was one person we worked when we worked in Ukraine. We had a day on, like, how does peace building look in the times of war? Like, where does peace building belong, with whom, and what system, and what level, and so on. And one of the things a person said was, well, at first we need to protect our bodies, then NVC can protect our souls. And I find that such a good description of course, we need to first of all protect life, protect values, the way we want to live, and then we can open for dialogue around how we want to change things. So I've come to realize that I want to do more of that, and I have done that recently as well, more protective use of force, awareness of that. But it's such a beautiful concept that Marshall put together for us to kind of explore.
So we were talking about peace and protective use of force, and also conflict. And how do you see the kind of interplay of peace and conflict?
Yeah, I find that such an important question, because peace very often is kind of then there is no conflict. It's like peaceful. There's no disturbances. It's very easy to see peace as some placid, calm thing. But I do think a sustainable peace, a peace that is kind of that we can trust in, it will include conflict. A peace that we can trust in will include that people are feeling safe enough to speak up, even if it leads to conflict, to speak about things that are not so easy or convenient or fun, but actually speak about them so that we can keep building peace. So peace is not built on on dictatorship, where you cannot say anything. Of course you can have peace if you're a parent that decides everything and you give your children no say in anything. It looks like very peaceful family. But when these kids become teenagers, you probably will see that it wasn't a stable peace. It wasn't peace that was built on openness or spaciousness for more values or more different perspectives. So I think, I don't know if there's a better word than peace, but at least I like us to look at it when we talk about it. What do we really mean? It's like health. Is health just avoiding not being sick? Is that what health is? No, health is much more than that, than not just being sick. It's the same with peace.
when I listened to you, what came to me was like the word like vibrant peace. You know, the vibrancy, the aliveness of that, the, as you mentioned, the different perspectives and the safety that enables us to express ourselves, to speak up. And what I also find really important, that there is enough of a like a vessel to hold that there are spaces that are contained, that are somehow held for this exchange, because many times what happens on the social media, for example, is not really contained well. There is not a sense of like dignity also in how it is done. How do you see this, or how do you see also the topic of dignity? It's such an interesting quality.
It is. Dignity is such a beautiful part of being human. And when I do trainings on shame, it often comes up as one of the qualities that people go like, but what is it? Is it just respect? Like, can we equal respect and dignity? And for me, the word in itself points at not just surviving, not just living, but actually living with a sense of that I'm happy about how I do things, that I feel proud, not proud as I'm better than you, or proud in like I'm so good, but no, it's a sense of, whoa, I use this image of a 4-year-old that has just done a painting, and she comes to you and she has this painting and this drawing of, and then she gives this to you and she says, well, look at, I made this beautiful horse running towards the forest and all these flowers. And of course the adult sees some colors and some shapes, and in that moment we're kind of getting a chance to hold someone's dignity. The child comes there with that dignity, and it's very vulnerable, actually showing your creation, and that comes the whole life. But when they are 4, the way they are treated, if we find interesting what they had been making, the drawing or the painting, if we kind of ask them questions about, so yeah, I guess you really enjoy this, like having dignifying their way of showing up in the world. I think that then they will get a sense of, this is how I want to treat me, and I want to treat others, with that sense of value in each of us being kind of vessels for life. It's quite amazing, actually. We are kind of walking on this planet, and we all have life in us that moves us to do different things. And that life, to be curious about that, to dignify that life source, for me, that is such a joyful everyday life experience, of how can I dignify life inside of this person. And when we talked about shame before, when people come to, oh, I feel shame, my need for dignity is not met at all. It's such a possibility for finding that. What kind of thoughts, what kind of actions, what kind of support can actually bring more dignity.
Yeah, I just witnessed the kind of wonder as you talk about this, and I like the phrase like dignifying life, dignifying life's experience. And I'm so glad that you're also mentioning pride, because pride is such an important antidote to shame, as I know from somatic experiencing. So I'm really glad that it comes up. What is exciting for you right now in your work and in your life?
Oh, there are so many things. One thing is that I'm constantly, I've written many, many books. It's like 23, I think, in Swedish at the moment, and it's like half are translated. And I'm still writing on a few more books, and it's always such a humbling experience, because when I write about something, like right now I'm writing about lying, like what is really lying, and what purpose, why do people lie, and why most of us lie, like many times per day. We do small lies, like I'll be home in a minute, and it's actually, we know it's going to take us at least 7 minutes to come back. So we do those things, and what place does that have? And then when I get the chance to look into that, like the humbling experience of, oh, there's someone that really knows about some subject that I'm writing on. I just love that. And the me compiling what I know with what other people have, you know, researched and know, and try to make use of that when it comes to human communication. So that is one thing. Another thing is that I get to do mediation work with different groups, with different individuals. And I always find that also, I always learn when I do a mediation myself. And it's great because, you know, I do mediation trainings, and just to have my own experiences is so important for me.
Yeah. So I hear a lot of like learning as the kind of common denominator of what you enjoy doing, and also curious about your exploration of lying, because my daughter is at the age when she's just beginning to apply lying, and it's very interesting. Is there anything that you would like to add, maybe for the people who are watching this? Anything, I don't know, maybe for parents or people who try to practice nonviolent communication?
Yeah, one thing that comes up as you ask this question and the question before, it's like I'm inspired by someone called Frank Ferrelli. He did something called provocative coaching, and I see Marshall Rosenberg, the guy behind NVC. He was very much doing this. But one thing for me is like, I think, don't be an expert, be a fool. That is one of the things that comes from Frank Ferrelli. Don't be an expert, be a fool. And when I can remember that, and I don't mean then to not have pride over what I actually know, but it's in the moment when I meet people to not think I know it all, to remember that in this area I might not at all know what this person is going through or what is going to happen. But I can actually be more open when I play with the idea of don't be an expert, be a fool.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I'll remember that. Liv, thank you very much for being willing to do this. I enjoyed it a lot.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.